Welcome into Forward Progress here on the Hammer Betting Network, presented by Betfred Sportsbook. If you haven't checked out Betfred, be sure to do so. If you're in Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Ohio, Pennsylvania, make sure that you check out Betfred. Make them a part of your day in terms of using their sportsbook, your overall collection of sportsbooks. Can't recommend Betfred enough, and thank them very much for the sponsorship here. I'm Rob Pizzola. I will be with you over the course of the next hour, and we'll be bringing in different guests over the course of the next hour. Last Friday, here on the Hammer Betting Network on Forward Progress, I was joined by the Hitman. He will step up and in a few minutes or so, break down his thoughts on some key props in the NFL Divisional Round this weekend and just his overall thoughts on the games. I will then be joined by a fellow paisano, John Laghezza. He is a writer, NFL and MLB for The Athletic. If you caught our Call to the Pen MLB playoff preview show, he was a part of that earlier this year. I like John quite a bit. I think he brings a very interesting perspective to betting props, looking to find some plus EV stuff and not lay very much vig in doing so. So very excited to have John Laghezza on here on Forward Progress for the first time. And then Iain MacMillan will join me later on. You're familiar with Iain MacMillan from Friday's Anytime Touchdown Scores. He'll give us his favorite props for this weekend. And also, I'm going to ask him about some anytime touchdown scores as well. I know those are very popular bets nowadays, and definitely want to get his thoughts on those. In terms of programming for this weekend, I know a lot of you were watching the live watch-alongs I did last week on the Hammer HQ. Those are happening again this weekend. So tomorrow night, Saturday night, it's the Giants and Eagles. This is starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. It'll be live on the Hammer HQ YouTube channel presented by Betfred Sportsbook once again this weekend. And I'm going to be joined by a few guests, including Adam Chernoff, Spreadopedia, Andy Molitor. So that's the New York Giants and the Philadelphia Eagles. And then Sunday, 6:30 Eastern Time. A little bit different timing this week because of the way that they've scheduled the games. Clive Bixby, Adam Chernoff, and Hitman will be joining me for what's going to be a very sweaty matchup between the Dallas Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers. You see me with the Cowboys symbol behind me here. I am a Cowboys fan. Very much looking forward to that. Quickly, before I am joined by Hitman here momentarily, I do want to give a brief update on where we stand in the market right now. For those of you who watched the Wednesday show, we went through it with Chernoff early on in that one, Eric Eager. We kind of broke it down, what we like in terms of plays or what we were monitoring in terms of plays. But there has been some market movement over the course of the week. Started yesterday with a little bit of money coming in on the Chiefs. So at Betfred, our presenting sponsor, the number is now -9, which was bet up from 8.5 yesterday. And that's pretty much the case across the board. So we are starting to see, or have seen in the last day, a little bit of Chiefs money with the total at 52.5 in that game. Giants and Eagles for tomorrow night. The market's kind of stayed flat, right at 7.5. Haven't seen a ton of movement in this game. Total as well at 48. This is interesting because we saw the Giants draw a lot of game day money last week against the Minnesota Vikings, and we've seen the Eagles draw a lot of game day money over the course of the past 2 years whenever they've played, yet the market is pretty quiet on this one. So it'll be interesting to see if we get anything tomorrow in terms of line movement in the Giants and the Eagles. Then on Sunday, we have the Bengals and the Bills. Bills up to 5.5 at our presenting sponsor, Betfred. The total is at 49. We did start to see some sixes pop up in Las Vegas last night. At the South Point was one in particular that popped up with Cincinnati 6, but obviously the offensive line injuries playing a key factor in this one overall. And then our final game on Sunday, Cowboys and 49ers. Cowboys draw the early money over the course of the week, Monday, Tuesday, even a little bit of Wednesday, 3.5, down to even 3 at some books, which were heavily juiced towards the Niners at that point. The Niners have since taken money. They've been bet back up. And the total, kind of the same type of thing. Early money on the under over the course of the week, even some books getting down to 45.5. We're now back up to 46.5 at our presenting sponsor, Betfred. So that's the market update for these games. There's still some stuff we can do here, but the Friday show today, we'll talk a little bit about sides and totals, but there will be a lot more dedication to props as well on today's episode. And there's no better man to bring in to talk props than the Hitman himself, widely regarded as one of the best props bettors out there. Hitman, how are things going?
Doing good. Got a day, as you could see, not at the office right now. I'm getting ready to bet some props right now at some places by me. So little pit stop that we made before that.
Yeah, I think for some people out there, they don't realize what goes into betting on sports and doing it professionally. Obviously, you have your online outs and you can do a bunch of things there, but especially where you're located, I would think that these drives are more frequent than most people really think they are.
Yeah, they're being written on my taxes. It's saying every single trip, all the gas I'm paying. It's a lot of gas money and a lot of miles that I'm adding onto the car. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, you got to do what you got to do. For those that don't know, Hitman joined me. Which game did you join me for in the watch along last week?
The craziest ending of the week, the Baltimore-Cincinnati game.
Baltimore-Cincinnati, and Hitman did show a stack of losing tickets that he had on his desk. I did try to get him to eat one, which he refused to do because he needed to file them for tax purposes. Wouldn't eat one ticket for us on air to satisfy the viewership because he needed to file them for his taxes. A true professional right there, Hitman.
You know the deal. You know the deal. It's a never-ending grind. But yeah, I'm ready to get into some of the props this week.
Okay, we will get into them. Before we do, I just want to get your thoughts on one thing, which is the teaser heard round the world this week. And there's been a lot of commentary about it. You have the notion of everybody's betting this teaser, so I don't want to bet it because, it's too good to be true type of situation. Then you have the opposite end of the spectrum where it's like, this is just a great teaser play. You can tease down the Eagles. You can tease down the Chiefs, depending on the number, but below 3. Curious if you actually played that teaser along with a lot of people that advocated for it earlier this week, or if there's something that's keeping you off of it that you thought that maybe this isn't the greatest bet or as great a bet as people think it is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't subscribe to the theory that everybody is playing this teaser, so it can't be good. I mean, it's an advantage teaser. I mean, if somebody was teasing the totals of two of these games or something, I would say that's a stupid teaser. I don't care that everybody's playing it, but it's obviously if you're going to tease games, this is the corridor that you want to do it through. And if you do happen to like the Kansas City and the Eagles side and you're better off teasing it, I mean, I'm not opposed to it at all. I personally did not play it, and I don't know if I'm going to. I like the Kansas City side a decent bit. It's the Eagles side that's worrying me a little bit. And really the worry is just Jalen Hurts' health. Now, I know with teasers, what you want to do is you want to pick a game that you think's low variance. If the game's a high variance game, typically you don't want to tease that game. And I just think that the Hurts factor with the injury, it just makes this game a lot more high variance of a game. And Jalen Hurts is a guy that, as much as he has improved as a passer and he has become a significantly better player, especially as a passer, that I ever thought he would be. I was not super high on Jalen Hurts coming out. He's still not like an elite thrower by any stretch of the imagination. His legs are really what makes this Eagles offense go. And you got to see against the Giants the last time they played, 0 designed rush attempts, 1 rush attempt total. Now, obviously the logic of, that game was not as meaningful. I totally buy that. I totally understand that. But I'm just kind of in a mode with Jalen Hurts that I want to see him run aggressively before I'm looking to back Philly. So I just think there's a little bit of variance with this game that has kept me off of it. But am I opposed to anybody that's teasing it? Not really. It's just something that I don't think I'm going to end up playing.
Fair enough. Yeah, for me, it was just like it kind of satisfies the conditions that you want with the teaser that you're playing, getting through 7-3. My only challenge is that you got high totals in these games, right? Which typically lend themselves to a little bit more variance. That would be, if someone wanted to talk me out of the teaser, that would be it, or the Jalen Hurts uncertainty as well, which is kind of the reason that I personally haven't pulled the trigger on the Eagles, despite having a numbers edge on them, because who knows? Like I'm just playing a guessing game at this point as to whether or not he's at 100%. But let's get into the props game here, Hitman. And when you joined us last week, you were heavily focused in on the Seattle San Fran game. So let's start with the 49ers. Is there something specifically that you saw with the team last week that has you eyeing something in the 49ers Cowboys, the late game on Sunday?
The only play that I went back to the well to that I did bet last week, and I'm going to bet the same play this week, and I have bet the same play, was last week I bet Elijah Mitchell under rush yards. And I also was on McCaffrey over, and my handicap to that was, McCaffrey didn't get a truly elite snap usage during the regular season, but so much of that was, one, that they were conserving him for the playoffs in my mind, and two, the fact that so many of these games were blowouts. I mean, San Fran was destroying everybody in the second half of this season, that you would see in the second half of these games, guys like Jordan Mason would come in and they'd play mop-up duty, and McCaffrey wouldn't get much usage. But if you looked in the first half, McCaffrey was getting a lot of usage in these games. It was the second half where he wasn't playing as much. Obviously, the playoffs, it's do or die. You're going to play your guys the whole time. And what happened in the first half against Seattle, McCaffrey had over 90% of the snaps. So the high leverage spots for San Fran when it was a close game, McCaffrey was getting pretty much all the usage. Elijah Mitchell had 2 carries. What ends up happening in the game is San Fran gets up big. Elijah Mitchell comes in, gets his 7 carries when they're up 14-21. And you look at the box score and you're like, oh, McCaffrey got 13 carries or something like that. And Mitchell got 9, I believe. So it looks closer, that split, but it's really not when you're talking about a high leverage spot. And I mean, with Rob, we know that these are the most efficient spreads of the entire season in the playoffs. The spread is telling us it's going to be a 3.5, 4-point game. If San Francisco blows Dallas out, then you know what? Like, Mitchell unders could be in trouble. But if the spread does stay around this 1-score game that the spread is indicating that it might be, I think that Elijah Mitchell on his unders has some value. So I played under 37.5 rushing receiving was my favorite play involving him. That was not as widely available. The rush yards were more widely available, and that's a fine alternate to me. I played under 30.5, under 29.5 rushing yards. But if you can get the combined yardage, I prefer that, just because Elijah Mitchell, his pass game usage last week was a little bit fluky, because even when he was the workhorse for San Francisco, he was not a guy that got much work in the passing game.
So really quick follow-up question for you there. By the way, I agree with everything that you said in terms of when you look at the game state, McCaffrey is like the neutral game state guy, plain and simple, and he has been for a while. But I'm curious what makes you target the Mitchell unders instead of the McCaffrey overs. Like, is it just a pure numbers thing? Is it that you have the built-in, potentially a player getting injured and leaving the game early? Maybe the market is just a little too high on McCaffrey because he's a more popular player. Just out of curiosity, like when you're breaking down the running back, like the backfield, what's your process? Do you immediately look at numbers first? Just walk me through that.
It's a consideration. I've honestly been going back and forth, and last week I did play McCaffrey overs. This week it was a little bit of, if you're going to play McCaffrey overs and Mitchell unders, you are kind of double barreling almost on your handicap, where if you're wrong, there's a good chance you're going to go 0-2. And if you're right, obviously there's a good chance you're going to go 2-0. But that was a little bit of a factor that I'm confident in my handicap, but I don't know if I'm just that in love with it that I'm going to double barrel it this week. And with the Mitchell one, it's just that there's more outs on playing a Mitchell under as far as a McCaffrey over. And by outs, I mean, Elijah Mitchell, my handicap could be correct that
Yep.
Elijah Mitchell could not play much, and then I'm probably going to win my bet. Or Elijah Mitchell, maybe he gets more work, but he's inefficient because Dallas has a pretty good defense. Maybe San Francisco, their game plan coming into this game is we're going to throw on a Cowboys secondary that's been struggling a lot recently, and they're starting the corpse of Xavier Rhodes at cornerback. And if they're doing that, then that's going to hurt McCaffrey, but it's also going to hurt Mitchell. So with the Mitchell one, I mean, it was close. I have a little bit of an edge on the McCaffrey rushing receiving over 105.5. I'm definitely considering it. Maybe it does even end up being a play on my part. I've been going back and forth, but I just thought that the Mitchell one was just a little bit stronger.
Fair enough. I mean, I think that's completely logical reasoning. There's something to it there at least. Let's stick with the other Sunday game. Rewind to last week, and we saw a lot of people playing overs on quarterback rushing yardage. And I think one of the angles was it's the playoffs. These haven't been adjusted up enough for the fact that quarterbacks are going to lay it all out on the line. We have a game between Buffalo and Cincinnati where we have Josh Allen, who has been known to lay it all out on the line, even some regular season games before. Just getting word that Williams and Kappa officially ruled out for Cincinnati. That's no surprise. That was what was expected there. But you are looking at Josh Allen in the rushing game this week. Walk us through that.
Yeah, Rob, just to follow up on what you said about Kappa and Williams getting ruled out, does it not seem like Adam Schefter has like his tweets drafted and he says when Hitman goes on with Rob Pizzola, I'm going to tweet all the breaking news? That's 2 weeks in a row now.
The good news is with this one is that at least it was expected, right?
Yeah.
It's not something that's coming, like we all expected that this was going to be the case. But yes, it's got to be Schefter's social media intern. I don't know what you did in a past life to that person, but they don't like you, Hitman.
Yeah, right. But yeah, Josh Allen, I did play his over rushing yards. The line, it opened comically low, and it wasn't at places that were taking very big limits, but it opened at, if you believe it or not, 40.5, which was just super low. But even at 45.5, 46.5 right now, I think that it has some value. I thought that it should have opened closer to last week's number, which closed at 50.5 against Miami. And you could say, well, he went under by a mile last week, and that's why it's adjusted. I mean, listen, it's a one-game sample size. Stuff can happen. But in this Allen's history on high leverage spots, he's been looking to run. And I'm not going to let one game deter me from that. So for me, I just thought, and this is a game that theoretically you could see it being a back and forth close game. I kind of like Cincinnati with the spread. So I think it's going to be a little bit closer game than the 5.5. I think it could end up being a field goal game, to be honest. And you're right about the quarterback rushing yards and the high leverage spots. It's starting to get accounted for more than it used to in the market. So you really got to kind of pick and choose your spots. Like, for example, I'm not going to be on Daniel Jones over this week because his over-under is at 45.5. And, I mean, there was times during the season you could play him over 31.5 rushing yards. You could play him last week at 37.5 rushing yards. It's at 45.5 now. I'm not going to play that. But Josh Allen is at a number that we have typically seen him around in the regular season. He's been around that 42.5 to 45.5 rushing mark in most of his games this season. So I think that the Allen number is probably good up to the 48.5 mark.
Yeah, definitely some inflation on the Daniel Jones numbers this week, and you got to wonder whether or not that's actually warranted considering he's coming off the Vikings defense, and the Eagles defense is very different. So I want to get your final thoughts on this game before I let you go here, but Eagles and Giants, and for me, the Giants offense looked great last week, but I think that there's maybe a little bit of recency bias built into the market here, and people just expect that the Giants offense we saw last week is going to be the same one that comes out and plays the Eagles. I personally think that the Eagles have a lot of matchups that they can exploit in this game. I think their defensive line against the interior and right side of the Giants O-line is a nightmare matchup for the Giants. And I also think that the Eagles have the corners to play these Giants receivers one-on-one. I'm curious how you're attacking the Eagles and Giants from a props perspective.
Yeah, so from the two props that jumped out to me when the openers came out was Daniel Jones under and Isaiah Hodgins under. Jones opened in the mid 220s and Hodgins was around 45 and a half. And these are two players that they just haven't hit this number much during the season. I don't have the exact number on Jones on how many times he's went over this, but hasn't been often. And usually you'll see like an inflation, like when Jones played Minnesota, his number was a lot higher than it typically was coming into the game. But you can make logical sense of it saying, you know what? I mean, the Vikings are a terrible pass defense. You could theoretically see a world where they're going to be throwing on them and having success. So I could see the reason that the change was made. But this number came in for Jones higher than it's been pretty much all season. And you're facing a team that has had an elite pass defense throughout the season in the Philadelphia Eagles. So I like Jones in the mid 220s. That's been bet under a decent bit right now where it's kind of moved 7-8 yards. But the one that hasn't moved as much is Isaiah Hodgins under around 44 and a half, 45 and a half receiving yards. Rob, let me ask you, without looking it up, Hodgins went over that number just twice this entire season. What two games were they?
Okay, so I think this is going to be correlated with Daniel Jones going over. So I'm going to say Vikings and Lions.
Yeah, it was Vikings and Vikings.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yes.
The two worst defenses in the league, the Vikings and the Vikings. So, yeah, I mean, those are the two games he went over. The Vikings have the slowest and some of the worst corners in the entire NFL. Hodgins has the tough matchup for the Giants because he plays most of his snaps on the outside where Slay and Bradbury are. The interior has been where the Eagles have given up most of their pass game production. And I believe Avonte Maddox is banged up for this game as well, their nickel corner. So I feel like if there is going to be a matchup that is favorable for them, it's going to be in the slot. So I think that the guy that you could take advantage of with a little bit of inflated Giants numbers is Isaiah Hodgins under. And plus, Daniel Jones is running more. His rush yards is the highest it's been in forever. So if Daniel Jones is running more, obviously that correlates a little bit to receivers getting less work in the passing game.
I totally agree with this one. I've played some Hodgins unders myself. And just on your Daniel Jones point, because you don't have the numbers in front of you, he had 2 regular season games this year where he threw more than 228 yards. 2 where he threw more than 228 yards. It was the Vikings and Lions.
Vikings.
Yeah. The Lions.
And the Lions game was a game script where they were down like 20 points, I remember, in the second half. And he had to throw. I remember that because I had Jones unders that game because it was a wind game, actually. And as soon as they got down, I knew I was in trouble. But yep.
It's hilarious because this is how far we've come because of one game, right? Like, actually, just to go even further on Daniel Jones, he reached 200 passing yards in only 3 regular season games total. 203. Now that, obviously he adds a dynamic with his legs as well, but we have really, in the span of 1 week, come a long way on what people think the New York Giants are, especially offensively.
Well, I live in an area with a lot of Giants fans and a lot of biased Giants fans, and some of them were telling me just after last week, they said Daniel Jones deserves to be in the MVP discussion of the NFL. And I said, go back and do me a favor. Tell me the last time a quarterback won league MVP throwing 15 passing touchdowns. It had to have been in like the 1960s, we'd probably say. 50s, maybe?
Yeah. That's actually just borderline laughable. I do a show every week on the Mayo Media Network with Cam Stewart, a fellow Canadian guy, and he just loves like all these mid-tier average quarterbacks, but he always talks about them like they're good. And then we actually put him to the test last week and rhymed off every single quarterback in the league to figure out where he actually ranks Daniel Jones, and it ended up being like 18th or 19th, and he finally came to the admission of like, okay, he's below average. And I think like, don't get me wrong, amazing game last week. Like that was great to watch. It was really still probably like a 99th percentile game for Daniel Jones, what we saw against the Vikings last week.
Yeah, I think his ceiling is he develops into a Ryan Tannehill-esque player, and that's not a negative. Ryan Tannehill at points in the last few years has been considered the 12th, 13th best quarterback or something. So I think Daniel Jones, when you get him weapons, he could be that. But yeah, I think it's time for people to pump the brakes a little bit off of some really good performances against the Vikings twice and the Colts.
For sure. I'll let you get out of here now. I know you got some tickets to play. By the way, Eric says that he loves watching these numbers move as you talk about them. So maybe you're doing some damage to the market as you give them out, but at least you already played them. So good closing line value for you, Hitman, on the plays. But appreciate your time. All the best this weekend. Am I talking to you this weekend on the watch along? I think I am, right?
Yeah, we're doing how about them Cowboys in the fourth quarter?
Oh, you got the fourth quarter. Yes, that's right. You get to see me at my worst, sweating a Cowboys game in the final there. But appreciate it. All the best, and have a good one.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, that's the Hitman. Follow him on Twitter at Hitman428. Pretty solid guy, and I think as a lot of you have been able to pick up over the course of this last interview in the last 20 minutes or so, definitely has some market influence, and he is respected as well in the space. Do quickly want to get to a comment or two here. Got a question about the Cincinnati pass attempts. I would have thrown this to Hitman, but I know that he's not super high on props on this particular game. So I guess this is a Burrow attempts type of prop. And we had Adam Chernoff on midweek on Wednesday, who talked a little bit about this. I've talked about this as well. I fully expect Cincinnati to work on the short passing game against the Buffalo Bills. It would surprise me if they're trying to throw downfield with 3/5 of their offensive line out in this game. Just too much going on there where I would be really surprised if they do anything differently. You might get a scenario where they try to run the ball heavily, keep Josh Allen on the sidelines, off the field. Definitely something to that in terms of a game script. But, I mean, I don't know that they could make this number high enough, especially when you consider the possibility that the game script is that they're trailing, especially with where the spread has moved out to, 5.5 at Betfred. I don't hate that whatsoever. Just taking a quick check-in on the market right now, with Williams and Kappa being ruled out, injuries on the offensive line for the Cincinnati Bengals, we really haven't seen a shift in market at all. So we're at the point now where this has already been priced in. We knew this early on. Jonah Williams looked like a pretty bad injury last week. Alex Kappa, neither of them were practicing yesterday. The market, I think, is already adjusted for it. So when you're handicapping the Bills and the Bengals, there's going to be a lot of people that are talking about the offensive line injuries for the Cincinnati Bengals, which definitely exist. But then you have to ask yourself, has it gone too far at this point? Yeah, like they exist, but have we already accounted for that? And it's fine to say that, no, we haven't, and that like there's more room for this one to go. But as it stands, the market has accounted for it. I'll be joined momentarily by John Laghezza, who does write for The Athletic, loves to bet props. Sure, we'll give out a bunch. Iain MacMillan of BetSided. You see him here on the Hammer Betting Network, Vegas Insider, co-host of the Bacon Bets podcast, will join as well. While you are in the stream, if you are enjoying the content that we put out here on the Forward Progress channel, please subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button as well. Give us a thumbs up if you do enjoy the content. It helps other people find it. And ultimately, if other people are finding it, I can keep doing more and more of it over the course of the week. So please, if you can, like and subscribe to the channel. Also, in the YouTube comments, if you do want to see me ask a guest a question or answer it myself, definitely I can get to it in the comments over the course of the rest of the stream here today. Want to just briefly discuss a couple of things that Hitman mentioned, but The Isaiah Hodgins under receiving yards, I think, is a very solid look for this week. And my uncertainty when I'm thinking about the Eagles and Giants game and why I don't want to lay the points with the Eagles necessarily is the Jalen Hurts situation. And I mean, maybe in hindsight, I'm going to look back and say I missed a bet on this game. I should have been more eager to bet this game. But I don't see this as a particularly good matchup for the Giants offense. And I really think the Giants are going to struggle to move the ball in this game. Now, granted, they do have a very good coaching staff. They have Brian Daboll as their head coach, who did wonders with the Bills offense. Mike Kafka, their offensive coordinator, has done a great job this year. But when we look at the previous meeting between these two teams back in week 14, it was a very rough one for the Giants offense. The 48-22 final score is extremely flattering for the Giants, in my opinion, in that game. They got outgained by 1.7 yards per play. It was just a real struggle for them overall. And 7 of their points came off of a blocked punt. A lot of their points came in garbage time. A lot of the yardage came in garbage time. And what I mentioned to Hitman, I think, is something that is just a nightmare, like a disaster matchup for the Giants. We look at the Eagles this year leading the league in sacks. They have such a deep defensive line, and they just rotate players in and out on the defensive line over the course of the game, depending on the situation. Obviously, you have your household names like Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave on the outside, Josh Sweat. But then you add in guys like Jordan Davis, who they drafted into the mix, Ndamukong Suh, who they picked up, Robert Quinn, who they picked up, Linval Joseph, and that, like, Derek Barnett is on IR. This really shows you the depth of the offensive line for them overall. But when you add in that fact, then you look at the Giants O-line. And the Giants O-line, outside of their left tackle, Andrew Thomas, who's fantastic, their center, John Feliciano, has kind of fallen off over the course of the past few years. Their right tackle, which they drafted as a rookie, Evan Neal, has been flat out bad this year. Their left guard, Nick Gates, it comes back off of a gruesome injury, in the mix for Comeback Player of the Year award, but really hasn't performed at a high level. This is such a significant advantage for the Eagles, where I think that they're getting a lot of pressure. And the Vikings could not do this last week. The Vikings have struggled to generate pressure this year. I think it's a completely different animal. And then you do look at the coverage crew on the outside for the Philadelphia Eagles. You have Darius Slay, James Bradbury on the outside. Those players are better than any Giants receiver that they can throw out there. You have CJ Gardner-Johnson in the slot as well, who's a big corner, can be physical, obviously played some time at safety, can be physical in that type of role as well. So I don't know what the path to success here is unless the Giants just maybe keep feeding Daniel Bellinger over the middle of the field, or they establish some sort of run with Saquon Barkley. But in the first matchup between these two teams, if we break it down and we look at the struggles that Saquon Barkley had, he only ran the ball 9 times. A lot of that was because they were trailing in the game. But 6 of those 9 rushes came against a box of 8 or more defenders, which was the highest rate of the season for Saquon Barkley. So it was very clear the Eagles went in and said, we're not going to let you run the ball because we don't think that you can beat us in the passing game. And it worked. And that's worked for the Eagles against a lot of teams this year. I think that's another scenario. This is another scenario where it can work again this week. So don't like the matchup for the Giants offense. I'm mostly targeting in the props game unders for the Giants offense in this game. And again, there's a lot of uncertainty in the entirety of the game because of Jalen Hurts. But ultimately, if Jalen Hurts was completely healthy, this number does feel short, especially considering that Week 14 matchup. The Eagles were laying 7 on the road at the Giants. Now they have home field advantage coming off of a bye week. Pretty healthy. Lane Johnson expected to play at right tackle, which would be big for them as well. That's a pretty big difference overall for this team as a whole. So it'd be very interesting to see that. In terms of other props that Hitman liked, obviously we saw the Josh Allen over. Hard to argue with that. I mean, that's been a look for a lot of people over the course of the entire season. Josh Allen, big game, over rushing yards, tends to have a penchant to pick up yardage with his legs. Hard for me to argue against that. And then in terms of Elijah Mitchell, under in terms of total receiving yards, or sorry, total yards, rush or receiving, pretty much said that you could play that however you want it. Pretty good breakdown of that overall, right? When we consider the fact that in neutral game states, Christian McCaffrey has been the workhorse running back for them, and a lot of Elijah Mitchell's carries and receiving yardage has come in game states where the 49ers have got out to pretty big leads. It's not to say that the 49ers can't get out to a pretty big lead. However, the spread is 4 in the game. If you look at the Cowboys for the majority of the year, forget that you see this Cowboy symbol behind me that I'll try to just block out. I'm horrible with the opposites here. That'll try to block out for you and try to remain unbiased. But the likelihood that we see a blowout is, I don't know, lower than obviously what we saw last week against the Seattle Seahawks. And that's not to say that it can't be a blowout, but yeah, I mean, that's simply the case. So really good looks, I think, from all three of those. And again, you did see the market move on all three of those, and some sports books actually just take those lines down. So for whoever's watching and jamming these books on Hitman's plays, appreciate your support. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, because definitely some good value out there for those who are tuning into this on a daily basis. A reminder for everyone out there, live watch-alongs, again, this weekend. These will be the final 2 for me of the season, but they're going to happen. And for those that didn't watch last week, if you don't want to watch the Muppets that are commentating on the games, you don't have to. You can come over to YouTube. You can come over to the Hammer HQ. Just turn it on. I'm not going to commentate the game. I'm going to just give my thoughts on the game as it's going along in real time. And we do have guests that are going to hop in and out. So for the Giants and Eagles tomorrow night, kicking it off at 8 p.m. Eastern time, I'll throw out all the bets that I've made on the game so everybody knows my rooting interest in the game altogether. And then over the course of the game, I will welcome in Adam Chernoff, who appeared on the Wednesday show this week. I'll welcome in Spreadopedia, also known as Jason Weingarten, who's a big props player in the NFL as well. And then I'll welcome in Andy Molitor of the Deep Dive podcast, who will come in to the stream on Saturday night. Sunday night, same ordeal. Chernoff, Clive Bixby, who those who watch the Forward Progress station over the entirety of the NFL season, you know Clive, as we used to go live on Sunday nights every single week, breaking down what we saw in the NFL and looking ahead to the following week. And then the Hitman, who just steamed the entire props market so far that lines got taken off the board, will join me for the fourth quarter of the Cowboys and the 49ers as well. All right, let's get into some more props here. You know him from the Bacon Bets podcast. He's the senior editor of BetSided. You've seen him here on the Hammer Betting Network and on Vegas Insider as well. You saw him on a live watch along with me this weekend. Iain MacMillan at Iain MacBets. Don't forget, IAIN MacBets. Iain, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Rob?
It's going well. It's going well. I just want to get to the games, if I'm being completely honest with you. Yes. I haven't, I just love the NFL playoffs, the parity in the NFL, especially this year. I just basically want to see these games played out at this point, and having a team still in the playoffs in the Cowboys, just get me to Sunday at 6:30.
Is the divisional round the best weekend of NFL football of the season?
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
I'm going to say the wild card round because it has 6 games.
Yes, but the wild card round games sometimes are a little bit more lopsided, though.
I agree. So it depends on how you view it, but we got 5 good games last week. with the dud being the Bucks and Cowboys. We do have a couple spreads that are over a touchdown in the divisional round, which could be lopsided here as well. I mean, I'm not complaining, by the way. Like, I don't want people to call me a hater and be like, oh, Pizzola, like, divisional, stop complaining about. No, I'm looking forward to the games, but I'll take the 6 games over the 4.
And I will say this divisional round is almost certainly not going to live up to last year's divisional round, which was might have been the best like 2 days of football ever. Every single game came down to the last play.
It really did. Although the games came down to the wire. I don't know if they were the most entertaining of games, some of them, because we got that was Green Bay San Fran, correct?
Yes.
Which that game was close, but if we're being real, a little bit of a snoozer, I would say. I mean, you can feel free to disagree, but a lot of the game was just horrible offense, right?
Yes,
like painful
that
to
true.
watch.
Yeah.
And then I think that was the Bengals Titans as well, right? Which was the 9-sack game.
Yes, it was. Yes. But we also got Chiefs Bills, which was an insane game.
That was it doesn't get any better than that, man. Like the Chiefs Bills was absurdly good.
Yes.
Like, and you know, just as a neutral in the AFC, it's hard not to want to see that game again next week.
Yes, I agree.
All right. Let's find some people some value on the board this week. For those that don't know, you did again this year, you did the bet every game thing, correct?
Yes. I did. Yes, Rob. Not exactly the most plus EV strategy to do, but I enjoy it. I like the grind. It worked for me the first 2 seasons. It did not work for me this year, but that's the game. That's what I sign up for.
So with that said, I'm a bigger believer in long-term samples, and I'm not calling you Billy Walters or anything like that. This is not what it's about. But 3 NFL seasons where you bet every single game and you turned a decent profit, an ROI of like a couple percent. I think a lot of people out there would be extremely happy if they could do that. So.
Yes. I did. Yeah, I lost, I think, 12 units this year, but the year before I was up, I think it was like 27, 28. And the first year I was up like 5 or 6. So good now, but if I keep doing this, I wonder how long that's going to keep up for. But I'm happy with it so far.
It may not, like you said, it may not be the ideal strategy for betting the NFL, but hey, listen.
It's fun.
Exactly.
That's what I do it for. It's fun.
Exactly. Let's find some bets for this week. We'll start with Saturday. So Kansas City and Jacksonville. Kansas City out to a 9-point favorite in the game, 52.5 at our show sponsor Betfred. I don't see this as a particularly good matchup for the Jags defense when we consider how the first game went for them. I don't think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be interested in tailing this prop that you are throwing out here, Ian. But walk us through. You're not super high on Patrick Mahomes this weekend.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a hot take here, but yeah, my player prop is Patrick Mahomes. Well, I think his yardage total is now at 310.
Yep.
Early in the week is at 320. It went down to 315. So I actually got it at under 315.5. But I checked this morning and it's at 310. So it has dropped 10 yards. But I am going to take the under. I think that's a pretty high total for passing yards total, especially when it was, early in the week is at 320. He's averaging 308.8 yards per game. So still a touch under the set total now. And the Jaguars defense, I know they didn't look good for the majority of the year. They didn't look great against Mahomes the first time around, but they have played well. Now, that begs the question, why have they been playing much better? Is that because they've been playing against quarterbacks down the stretch of the season like Davis Mills and Joshua Dobbs? Probably. But they did hold Justin Herbert to 5.9 yards per throw last week. And if you do believe in the Chiefs, if you think they can win big, maybe they turn to the run game late in the game. Because I think for Mahomes to surpass his number, he needs to be throwing from the start of the game to the end of the game. Maybe that's not the case. Going to be the case with the game script. So, not exactly a bet that I bet. I don't think a lot of people are rushing to bet the under on Patrick Mahomes' passing yards total, but I'm going to do it. A little contrarian play to get the weekend started off.
Yeah, so I think there's a very valid point that you make there, and like a close So here's the thing. I know a lot of people who have bet the Mahomes over this week, and I wouldn't say sharp, by the way, just random people that I know, but they think the Chiefs are going to blow the Jags out. And for me, that's not where you want to bet the Mahomes over, because if there's going to be a blowout, I know it's a playoff game, but Andy Reid has been primed in the past to sit on leads and hand the ball off and just try to get to the end. I think that if you think the game is going to be closer, you'd be more inclined to bet the Mahomes over because he's got to do work. So with the spread being at 9, I actually don't hate the look. I mean, basically the line is telling us that there is a decent likelihood that this game is not close. And in that case, I don't think you're seeing Mahomes air it out over the course of the remainder of the game or looking for big splash plays down the field. I think if anything, it's short, intermediate pass game, a lot of handoffs. And I mean, I don't hate it. Well, I bet it, Ian. I'm not going to lie to you. You're a friend of mine, but
I wouldn't blame you.
Yeah, I mean, it's there are other things I would prefer to lose my money on the weekend. Not saying that this is a loser, by the way.
There is certainly a strong likelihood that I feel like an idiot when he has 350 passing yards at the end of the third quarter. That's more than possible.
Patrick Mahomes sets the record for passing yards in the first half of a game. Yeah, can see it. This next one that you're going to give us, so the night game, Eagles and the Giants. We just had Hitman on earlier. He almost made a case for the prop that you like. He preferred Isaiah Hodgins under on receiving yards. I then made a case for why I think the Giants offense is going to struggle in this game and not even look anywhere close to the offense that we saw a week ago against the Minnesota Vikings. And you seem to be inclined to say the same thing.
Yeah, so I'm taking Daniel Jones, another under passing prop, under 216 and a half passing yards. I think if the Giants, if they're smart, and I assume that Brian Daboll is smart, he seems to be, potentially coach of the year. Their game plan in this game should be to not throw the ball. The game plan should be to run the ball. Even if you want to run design quarterback runs with Daniel Jones, do that, because the weakness of this Eagles defense is their ability or inability to stop the run, because they are arguably the best pass defense in the NFL, at least if you look at some metrics. First in the NFL in opponent yards per pass attempt by 0.3 yards per throw. They also have the highest sack percentage, first in sack percentage, taking down the opposing quarterback over 11% of the time. Giants offensive line hasn't been great at protecting Daniel Jones. He gets sacked 8.57% of his dropbacks. So in my opinion, no matter what metric you look at, it'd be stupid for the Giants just to air this thing out. I think they should stick to the run game, even if they get behind a little bit. And also Daniel Jones, the total, like I said, 216 and a half, well above what he's averaging this year, 200.3 passing yards per game. And he didn't even come close to this in the one game that he played against the Eagles this season. So I think 216 and a half seems like a low number, but I'm still going to go the under. Unless they just throw the ball all game, but I think that'd be stupid, and I don't think that'll work.
I don't think they will do that. I completely agree with you on this one. I think a lot of the yardage that Daniel Jones gets is with his legs, and especially in the passing game. But just looking at the numbers this year, I mean, Daniel Jones put up 2 big games in the regular season. One was the Vikings, one was the Lions. Every other game that he played, he had 227 yards or less in the passing game. I really think people are overrating the New York offense. I mean, I think they're going to struggle again. You discount the Week 18 game, it doesn't matter. It was all backups against the Eagles. But that first game against the Eagles, they could literally do nothing until they got into garbage time. So,
yeah, and those 2 secondaries that you mentioned, the Lions and the Vikings, that Daniel Jones had good games against, arguably the 2 worst secondaries in the NFL this year. Like, he didn't do anything against any good secondary that he played against all year.
We could put together an offense formed of the creators that are on the Forward Progress channel. Producer Zach, me, you, Hitman, Chernoff. Like, I think we could shred the Lions for a couple hundred yards if we had to. All right, let's move over to Sunday. We got official ruling earlier that Jonah Williams, Alex Kappa ruled out. That was expected, that the Bengals were going to be missing offensive linemen. I don't think this is going to prevent them from throwing the ball. I think it's going to prevent them from throwing downfield.
Yes.
So I think you'll see more in the short and intermediate passing game. You like one of the Bengals receivers over in terms of receptions. Give us the case for it.
Yeah, and that works well exactly for this total, because if it's going to be a lot more shorter passes, that's going to mean just a lot more completions in general. So Jamar Chase over 7.5 receptions. I got it at plus 115. I think it's down to plus 110 this morning. So some plus money prop. I played over Jamar Chase 6.5 receptions last week, plus 105. That cashed like 2 minutes into the second half. So I like this play quite a bit since Jamar Chase came back from injury, surpasses total in 4 of his 6 games since then. Really 4 or 5, because you can kind of throw away his first game back because they kind of eased him back into the playbook, into the offense. But the main reason why I like it is because just the amount of targets they're putting Jamar Chase's way in the second half of the season. Over his last 5 games, 12.8 targets per game. That is an insanely high rate of targets. They're just throwing it to Jamar, throwing it to Jamar, throwing it to Jamar. So yeah, for plus money, over 7.5 receptions, especially if they just need to keep it to short passes. That means, like I said, probably just more completions in general. It'd scare me a little bit to go over his yardage total, because I think last week he had 9 receptions, but I don't think he went over his receiving yards total, to be honest. Or if he did, he barely did. I don't think he cracked 100 yards. So I'm banking on that again. A lot of receptions, maybe not a lot of yards. This last stat isn't maybe too indicative, but Bills are allowing 22.4 completions per game, 21st in the NFL. I actually love the Bills in this game. I think they win big, so maybe that'll lead to some garbage time receptions for Chase too.
I think a lot of the props we've talked about on forward progress here over the course of the week are somewhat correlated. So you like the Jamar Chase over receptions. I don't mind that at all. We've been talking about Joe Burrow over on pass attempts, which I think is like kind of highly correlated with Jamar Chase, who had a stat line of 12 receptions, 84 yards last week. I think his total was 87.5, but my memory is like that of a 100-year-old man, so I couldn't tell you for sure. But before we get you out of here, Iain, people on this channel know you from Anytime Touchdown Scores, where you give away different picks in terms of who's going to score over the course of the week. I'm not going to make you give 3 picks like you typically do on the show, or bucket them into the different hammer categories. Okay. You know, the sledgehammer and the welder chipping hammer and whatever else, other hammers we got out there. But there is an appetite for people to bet these picks. If there's one guy this week that's on your radar for an Anytime Touchdown scorer, who would it be and why?
Yeah, and I'm not going to do what Krabs does. Shout out Krabs. I love him for this, but I'm not going to give it a defensive touchdown, which he wants to do at 12
he loves
to 1.
Those defensive touchdowns.
A lot of value. A lot of value, he says. Shout out Krabs. Love him. But no, I am going to take someone. I didn't want to give out a favorite. I didn't want to give out like a Travis Kelce or like a Tony Pollard or something. So, and this actually is kind of, this goes against my Mahomes under passing yards total prop bet, but I do kind of like Marquez Valdez-Scantling to score, plus 230. 2 different reasons. I think with Mecole Hardman being out, I think that increases his chance of scoring, especially on deep balls. And I think if the Chiefs do score, and if they do just blow out this game and get some scores early, I think they might be able to take some deep shots against this Jaguars team that mostly plays man coverage, if I'm correct. Yep. And what is man coverage susceptible to? A deep shot. Who I think is the best target for the Chiefs to look at to get a deep shot touchdown? Marquez Valdez-Scantling. So around plus 230, plus 220, you can get him for someone that's above 2-1 odds. So Valdez-Scantling to score for the Chiefs.
I don't have the defensive personnel units in front of me. I know they play some cover 3. I also know that they've played, they've switched it up quite a bit on defense this year, but I like that look. And he gets more red zone targets than I think people realize as well. But that's just another thing to throw in there. Iain, all the best. Thank you very much for joining us here on Forward Progress. Hope you win all of your bets this week. I'm not opposite anything of you, so I don't have to like pretend and say good luck with your bets. Like actually good luck with your bets this week.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Rob. Good luck with your bets as well.
All right. That's Iain MacMillan, co-host of the Bacon Bets podcast. You can check him out here on the Hammer Betting Network, Vegas Insider as well, and his stuff with BetSided. We're going to wrap up the show here. Thank you very much to our show sponsor, Betfred. Once again, if you are watching from Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Ohio, or Pennsylvania, bet at Betfred. Bet at multiple sports books. Find the best lines, but make sure Betfred is one of them. Very solid sports book, good offering, top to bottom. Product is great. Pretty quick, reliable, in real time. Great live betting. Would highly encourage you to check out Betfred Sportsbook. Some programming notes for those who are asking about the pizza buffet. Is it still happening this week? Of course, the pizza buffet is still happening this week. We're doing it tomorrow afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern time, right on this channel, Forward Progress. Make sure you're subscribed to this Forward Progress channel. And if you haven't seen a live watch along yet, check it out. It's pretty fun. I enjoy doing them. We get very good feedback, very good viewership. That'll be on the Hammer HQ YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed to Hammer HQ. And if you do enjoy the watch-alongs and you watched them last week and you were in the chats, which were going wild during the games, tell your friends about them as well. Let other people know. We're trying to grow this as big as possible. The more I can grow the content, the more I can do the content. So do your part. Like and subscribe if you can. This has been Forward Progress on the Hammer Betting Network, presented by Betfred Sportsbook. I will see everyone back on this channel again tomorrow. Good luck with your bets.